We changed the will. Your brother gets everything, my dad announced coldly. Mom smiled, then my bother can handle bills, I replied while canceling every payment. They left me out of their future, so I let their power get cut for a week straight. The clink of silverware, soft jazz playing from the Bluetooth speaker, and the hum of polite laughter. Everything about that evening screamed family tradition. It was Sunday dinner at my parents' house, a monthly ritual I never missed, no matter how tired I was after my shift at the clinic. Mom made her famous pot roast, and Dad opened a bottle of red he'd been saving for a special night. It all felt warm, familiar, safe, until he put down his fork. The silence was instant. Fork still midair, I glanced at him. His eyes were cold, calculated, almost businesslike, as he wiped the corners of his mouth with his napkin and folded his hands like a CEO about to deliver bad news. We changed the will, he said. Just like that. No preamble. No explanation. Kyle gets everything. The air left my lungs like someone had punched me in the chest. I turned to my brother. He didn't even fake surprise. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped casually over the backrest like he'd won something he hadn't even worked for. Mom looked at me and smiled. That smug, patronizing smile that said, "Don't overreact, honey." Her tone matched it perfectly. It just made more sense this way. More sense? After everything I'd done for them? After being the one who stayed when Kyle left the state for college and never looked back? I forced myself to blink, to stay composed, even as the walls felt like they were inching closer. The warmth in the room turned to ice. I slowly set my fork down and pulled my phone out from under the table. With my thumb, I scrolled through my financial apps and quietly canceled every auto payment I'd set up for their utilities. Electricity, water, gas, internet, even their lawn care service. My voice didn't rise. I didn't cry. I just smiled, same as Mom had. Then Kyle can handle the bills too. Dad's face didn't twitch. He just picked up his glass and took a sip like he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of the dining table. Mom let out a soft chuckle. "Don't be petty, sweetheart." Petty? No. This wasn't petty. This was precise. I stood up, tucked in my chair, and looked around the room one last time. The same living room where I used to help decorate the tree, where I sat with Mom through late-night panic attacks, where I cleaned up after Dad's surgery when he could barely move. None of that mattered anymore. Without saying another word, I walked out. The door closed softly behind me, but the crack it left in my chest thundered like an earthquake. Something broke that night, and for once, I wasn't the one who'd be left to clean it up. It wasn't like I didn't see this coming. Deep down, I always knew where I stood in this family. When we were kids, Kyle would break a lamp, and I'd be the one grounded for not stopping him. He'd bring home C's and get a boys will be boys shrug. I brought home straight A's and got a quiet nod before being handed another chore list. At the time, I thought that was just parenting. Now I know better. At 17, Kyle wrecked Dad's old Chevy. Totaled it. They didn't even make him pay it back. Dad just called it a teachable moment and paid for a new car within the month. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs to afford my used Toyota, then lent it to Mom for 3 months straight when her transmission blew and she couldn't get to her yoga classes. I remembered driving Mom to her doctor's appointments when she got shingles, sitting beside her for hours, bringing her soup, changing her ice packs. Kyle? He didn't even call. Not once. But still, he was the golden boy, the one who'd do great things someday. I, on the other hand, was responsible. That was my title, my identity, the reliable daughter who stayed close, paid their phone bill without them asking, fixed the leaky sink myself because Kyle's not really a tool guy. I kept a spreadsheet, literally, of every recurring expense they had. Internet, heating, garbage, the extra payment on their mortgage when Dad's hours got cut. And every time I sent a payment through, I told myself, they love you. They just don't show it the way you expect. But that dinner table moment, it shattered that illusion completely. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being erased. I thought about the night I canceled their electric payment. I wasn't angry then, not in the screaming, punching way people think of rage. I was cold, focused, done. Because that's what betrayal from your own blood feels like. It doesn't explode. It corrodes, quietly, slowly, eating away at every warm memory until all you see are the cracks. I remembered Kyle asking me to co-sign his first apartment lease, saying, "Come on, sis, help a guy out." I did it, even though he had 0 credit. I paid the late fees when he forgot. Twice. They knew all that. They knew what I had done. And still they changed the will. Cut me out like I never existed. That night, after walking out of their house, I sat in my car with the engine off for over an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the dashboard and thought, let's see how well Kyle handles everything. I wasn't going to yell or beg. I was going to make them feel my absence in every dark corner, every cold shower, every dead phone line. They decided to erase me. So now I was going to let them live without me. Literally. The very next morning, Kyle swaggered into Mom and Dad's kitchen like he owned the place. Technically now he did. Or at least that's what they told him. He had his sleeves rolled up, sipping Dad's last cold beer from the fridge at 10 a.m., nodding like he was about to manage a Fortune 500 company. First thing I'm doing, he declared, is upgrading this place. Gonna turn the guest room into a gaming den. Maybe build a wet bar. Dad chuckled weakly. Mom just smiled. It was like they were convincing themselves that he was ready. That all those years of letting him get away with everything had somehow trained him for this. But real life doesn't care about favoritism. 3 days after the revelation, the internet went out. Kyle thought it was a glitch. Probably the router, he mumbled, smacking it like that would help. By day 5, the water company posted a red tag on the front door. Unpaid for 2 cycles. Kyle peeled it off and tossed it without even reading it. On day 7, the power went out fully. No lights, no heat. In the middle of March, Kyle blamed the electric company. These people are scammers. They can't just shut it off like that, he yelled, pacing in his boxers. Mom tried to boil water on a camping stove. Dad sat wrapped in 3 blankets in the living room, quiet for the first time in years. Then came the collection notices, all addressed to them, all stamped final warning. They tried calling me. I let it go to voicemail. Sweetie, I think something's gone wrong with the autopay, Mom said. Can you check on it, please? I didn't respond, but I listened. I played that voicemail 3 times while sipping tea in my warm, well-lit apartment. Their bills were always in my name. I had taken care of it all, quietly behind the scenes for years. Now it was their turn to notice what silence really sounds like. Kyle called next. Hey, sis. Look, I didn't know about the whole thing until they told me. I didn't ask for it. But, I mean, now that it's done, maybe we can work something out. That line almost made me laugh. Work something out? The same guy who once faked a knee injury, so I'd mow the lawn alone in the July heat? Now he wanted to talk? No, thank you. On the 10th day, I got a text from Dad. Just 4 words. We need your help. That's when I knew the plan was working. The silence was getting louder. The cold was sinking in. And for the first time, they were living the life they'd assigned to me, on the sidelines, powerless. The golden boy wasn't shining anymore. He was melting. It started with a knock on my door. I knew it was them before I even looked through the peephole. Something about the hesitant rhythm, the pause between knocks, told me it wasn't someone confident. It was someone desperate. I opened the door slowly, deliberately. Dad stood there bundled in a coat he hadn't worn in years. Mom was behind him, her mascara slightly smudged. Kyle was missing. Hey, sweetheart, Mom said with a practiced smile. Thought we'd stop by. No heat at your place? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Dad cleared his throat. Look, this whole thing with the bills, it got out of hand. Out of hand? I wanted to laugh, but I kept my voice calm. What do you need? Dad hesitated. It was the first time in my entire life I saw him unsure of his words. We were hoping you'd consider helping us out, just until things get back to normal. Define normal, I replied. Because to me, normal was handling your mortgage, your utilities, your car insurance, while you made Kyle your heir. Mom spoke up. Honey, we didn't mean to push you away. We just thought Kyle needed more help. I crossed my arms. And what about me? When I was working 2 jobs in college and came home to sleep on the couch because you gave Kyle my old room, did I not need help then? They didn't answer. You changed the will, I continued. You made your choice. Dad looked down. We made a mistake. That's when Kyle walked up the stairs behind them, shivering, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. He didn't look like the golden child anymore. He looked average, tired, overwhelmed. I can't do it, he muttered. The payments, the calls, the late notices. I thought you were handling all that stuff. You always made it look easy. That's because I said, quietly for years. They stood there in silence, finally understanding, finally seeing. Mom's voice broke the tension. So, will you help? I stepped aside from the doorway, letting the warmth of my home spill into the cold hallway. I'll help, I said slowly, but with my terms. They looked up, hopeful. First, we visit a lawyer. That will you rewrote? It gets revoked. Split evenly, or you get nothing from me again. Dad opened his mouth to argue, but I raised my hand. Second, Kyle gets a job. A real one. No more handouts. If he wants to be the man of the house, he earns it. Kyle nodded sheepishly. And third, I said, my voice firm, you apologize. For every moment you made me feel invisible in my own family. The silence stretched. Then Mom whispered, we're sorry. I held the door open wider. Then come in. It wasn't forgiveness. It was accountability. And it was just the beginning. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and sharper truths. I sat across from my parents and Kyle, my legs crossed, my expression unreadable. They fidgeted, Dad tapping his knee, Mom adjusting her scarf, even though the room wasn't cold. Kyle looked like he hadn't slept. Mr. Donovan, my lawyer, glanced over his glasses. So, let's be clear. You're here to amend the living will and financial power of attorney, correct? Dad nodded slowly. Yes, we'd like to adjust things. Mr. Donovan pulled out the original documents, flipping to the pages I already knew by heart. The ones where Kyle was granted everything, assets, property, even the lake cabin my grandfather built with his own hands. Who do you want to make the new primary beneficiary? Mr. Donovan asked. There was a pause, short but it held weight. Mom spoke first. Our daughter. Hearing those words, after years of being dismissed as just the backup plan, it landed heavy. Mr. Donovan nodded, making notes. And you're aware that this decision is final unless legally contested in court? Dad cleared his throat. Yes, it's what we want. Kyle looked away. Not a word from him. Not even a murmur of protest. Maybe he knew this was overdue. Maybe he was too embarrassed to fight now that the illusion of favoritism had fallen apart. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But inside I felt it, that long overdue shift in power. I hadn't begged for it. I hadn't manipulated anyone. I had simply made them see reality. And the house? Mr. Donovan asked. The deed will be transferred to her, Dad replied. She's been paying the taxes and mortgage anyway. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Not out of relief, but out of release. The weight they had dumped on me for years, it was finally being acknowledged. After signing the documents, Mr. Donovan slid the folder toward me. Congratulations, he said. You now legally hold the estate, including the financial accounts that were previously locked. Kyle's eyes widened. Wait, what does that mean? It means, I said calmly, if you want to borrow Mom's car again, you'll be calling me. Dad rubbed his temples. Let's not turn this into a power play. Oh, I'm not, I replied. I'm just making it clear. You've asked me to handle the responsibilities. I'm now the one making the calls, which means the cabin. Off limits unless you contribute to its upkeep. The bills? Paid if you follow the terms we agreed on. Kyle looked like he was shrinking in his chair. Mom sat frozen. And one more thing, I added. No more secrets. You want respect? It goes both ways now. The office went quiet. Mr. Donovan slid me a fresh copy of the revised will. The ink still wet. The power once stolen, now officially mine. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't the outsider in my own bloodline. I was the center, the anchor, the one who endured and rewrote the ending. It took less than a week for Kyle to lose his cool. It started with a phone call, then 3, then 6. He left voicemails filled with fake politeness, peppered with phrases like, let's talk and we're still family. But the desperation underneath was loud. He had just realized he'd been cut off from the accounts, the house, even the gas card my parents used to keep in his name. Then came the family dinner. We hadn't had one of those in a while, but Mom insisted. Let's all just sit together, like before. Her voice trembled like she knew this wasn't just a meal, it was a showdown. The table was set. Dad poured wine. Kyle walked in 10 minutes late, wearing his smug grin like armor. He barely glanced at me as he sat down and launched straight into it. So, I've been thinking, he said, his fork scraping his plate. Maybe we should revisit this whole situation. It's kind of extreme, don't you think? Dad and Mom glanced at each other. Silence. Kyle continued. I mean, I get it. She helped out, whatever. But we all know I've always been more involved emotionally. I leaned back in my chair. Emotionally? You vanished for 2 years, Kyle. You only came around when the word inheritance got involved. He laughed, awkward and loud. Okay, that's unfair. I've been busy, sure. But I'm still their son. No one's denying that, I said. But being someone's child doesn't mean you automatically get to profit off their life. That's not how respect works. He put down his fork. So, you're just going to keep control of everything? Dictate who gets what? That's not fair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and played back one of his voicemails. You think you're better than me just because you paid some bills? You're not. This family always puts me first, and you know it. Just give it back before you ruin everything. The room went still. Mom's face turned pale. Dad looked like he'd been slapped. I stood up, calm and collected. You don't get to play victim and bully me behind closed doors anymore. From now on, everything's transparent. Kyle, Dad said, did you really say that? He opened his mouth, closed it. No excuse came. I walked over to Mom and gently placed the house keys on the table. I'm not here to take anything that isn't mine, but I won't be manipulated either. I spent years cleaning up your messes, and you thought I'd just keep doing it while you cashed in. I looked at both of them. You taught me responsibility. I just decided to finally apply it to the right people. And then I turned to Kyle. You don't get to push anymore. This chapter? You're not writing it. He looked shattered, publicly stripped of the power he once thought was his birthright. And for the first time in years, I walked out first, while the golden boy stayed behind, speechless. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't slam doors. I didn't send angry texts or long emails. I just stopped showing up. I stopped calling. I stopped answering. I stopped saving them. It was like turning off a faucet that had been leaking for years. At first, the silence felt heavy, like I was doing something wrong, like I was betraying my own blood. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized I was finally giving them the gift of space they had long denied me. And it was time for them to sit with everything they'd done. A week after that dinner, my phone stayed quiet. Then came a message from Mom. Can we talk? Things are hard here. I didn't reply. Kyle sent a meme, then a joke, then a let's grab coffee sometime. I left it all on read. Then came the calls from the electric company. Apparently, the auto-pay accounts had all been under my name. I had canceled everything when I stepped back. Suddenly, the power at their house went out for 4 days in a row. No AC in the peak of summer. Dad had to drive to the store to get ice and fans just to keep things cool. Then their internet stopped. Kyle tried to restart it himself, but the account had been under my login. The same login he'd once called me obsessive for managing so meticulously. And the mortgage? That reminder came quick. Turns out those small, monthly payments I had been making weren't so small after all. I had been the invisible hand holding their world up. Without me, things began to unravel. I didn't take pleasure in their discomfort. This wasn't revenge through violence or cruelty. This was just removal. I stopped fixing what they broke. I stopped rescuing people who left me to drown. Weeks went by. I went on a road trip up the coast with my best friend. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for spending money on myself. I didn't check in, didn't update, didn't report my whereabouts like a soldier on duty. I lived, and while I lived, they struggled. One morning, I got a text from my cousin Jenny. Aunt Mary came to church today. Said she wishes she'd listened to you more. Looked really shaken up. It was strange. I should have felt vindicated, right? But what I felt was peace. Not because they were finally sorry, but because their choices were no longer my responsibility. They had written me out of their future, and I had let them. But now they were learning something hard. When you cut someone off out of selfishness, you don't just lose a person. You lose the glue that held your world together. And once it breaks, some things don't get put back together. Especially when the one who held the glue learns to walk away. A year passed. That year, I made it all mine. I traveled. I expanded my business. I didn't rush. I didn't worry. I let things unfold, not in their time, but in mine. I made new friends, pursued hobbies, and even started a new relationship. A healthy one this time. Not built on demands, expectations, or guilt. I was free, but I often thought about them. The people who'd once held my future hostage. The ones who thought they could erase me and just walk on unscathed. They didn't get away with it, not at all. They were still waiting for their golden ticket. But now it seemed the clock had struck midnight, and the clock tower was collapsing on them. I heard from Jenny again. She said Kyle was now fighting with Dad over their inheritance. They'd had a huge fallout over the money that Dad had promised would go equally between us all. It turned out Kyle had been making under-the-table deals and trying to take more than his fair share. The moment I walked away, they stopped relying on me, and now that I wasn't there to smooth things over, their greed was tearing them apart. Mom, who'd once been so concerned about being a good grandmother, had distanced herself from me completely. She tried to win back her relationship with me after everything, but it was too late. She was like a flower that waited too long for the sun. The petals had already fallen. Dad, on the other hand, wasn't the same strong, proud man he once was. He had let his empire of family slip through his fingers. The business had crumbled. The house was in foreclosure. All because of their own refusal to see me as more than a fixer, a problem solver, a safety net. Without me managing their chaos, the whole thing fell apart. But me? I had never felt more alive. I knew my worth. I knew my place. One day, as I sat in my new apartment on the balcony overlooking the city, I got a call. It was from Dad. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said, leaning back, looking at the skyline, my mind already set in stone. "What about?" I was wrong. We were wrong. And I'm sorry for everything I put you through. We need you back." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. It's a little too late for that. A silence hung between us, the kind that said everything but nothing at all. I was free. They weren't. And I wouldn't be their second chance. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jenny. She sent a picture of Mom standing outside my old childhood home, looking defeated. The house was being auctioned off. Life goes on. I had chosen to live for myself, and it was the best decision I ever made. And as for them, the world had stopped revolving around their drama, and for the first time in years, I was able to breathe. I was happy. I was whole. And they had nothing left.